All right, Shabbos, good morning. Let's begin. Our shir this morning is dedicated by Mrs. Rosalie Sklar and family in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Dr. Manfred Sklar and Menachos Mendel Ben Tzvi Hirsch, and we hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family in Nechama. And by Michael and Rachel Cherniansky and Akara Satov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Daf Yomi Limerick blog attaining 300 followers. Incredible. Wow. Hodula Hashem Kitov. Shkoach, Michael. Thank you for the creativity and thank you for sharing it with all of us. And by Ira and Miriam Grossman, as a zechus for a fush leima for Nechama Leah Bas Tvora, we hope that she, together with Kol Choli Yisrael, has a complete and enduring refuah. So we'll say, so let's begin. Today's daf is Tzadik 90. We are picking up, bless you, on Pei Tesima days 89b towards the end of the daf. Literally last line of the daf. Rabbi Abba Amr, Rabbi Amr says, so if you remember again yesterday, towards the end of the daf, we did it a little bit quickly, but importantly nevertheless, which was, we spoke about the cases where a karban was offered up shalol lishma, and even though it was offered up shalol lishma, the nesachim, the accompanying nesachim, are still offered up as part of that karban as well. And we discussed the reason for that was because halacha l'maisa, if we were to not offer up the nesachim, ultimately the karban itself would become compromised. So the Gemara gave a variety of different examples of that. So Rabbi Abba Amar Bishlam Hanach Olos Ninu. So we'll say in the cases that we quoted yesterday in the Gemara, it makes sense because those are all cases of olos, tap of tzaddik. Ilo chazu la'olas chova, karve la'olas nedava. Because also when it comes to an olam, if the worst case scenario is if it's not offered up as an olas chova, it could always be offered up as an adava. I.e., what the Gemara is saying is that halacha l'maisa with the cases that we spoke about yesterday, so even in the event that it can't be offered up as an obligatory offering, it can absolutely be offered up as a voluntary offering. Elahacha, lo mukmislei b'milsei. But in our case over here, if you do not go ahead and offer it up in its original fashion, asham nedava mi'ika. And we'll say ultimately again, is there ever a case of asham which could be offered up as an adava? And of course, the answer to that is no. So Tanya Kavase Rabbi Yochanan. So we have a brayz that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Asham mitzora sheshachtu shalol lishmo. If you have an asham mitzora that was shechted not for its original intention, shalol lishmo. O shalo nasan midamo al gabi bahonos. Or I will say, for that matter, the blood was not placed on the mitzora. So the halacha is hariza ola legabi mizbeach. Ultimately, again, it is considered an ola for the mizbeach purposes, v'ta'un nesachim, and it requires its nesachim, v'tzarach asham achar lahatira, and it requires another asham, ultimately, again, to permit it. So we'll say, so halacha l'maisa, what the Gemara just ends off by saying is quoting the brayz like Rabbi Yochanan, namely, that if you go ahead and you offer up the asham mitzvah shalol lishmo, meaning you offer it up just l'shem asham, but not l'shem asham mitzora, so the halacha ultimately is that you will offer it up, meaning the karban itself works. You have to bring the accompanying nesachim, but it does not satisfy the obligation of the mitzora, which I will say is the halacha ultimately again that we've seen by many karbanos, that if they're offered up shalol lishmo, the karban itself still works. The novelty of our sugya now is that it works, and you also have to bring the accompanying nesachim, but halacha l'maisa, it doesn't satisfy your obligation, and you're obligated to bring another karban ultimately to satisfy your obligation. Beautiful. Says the Mishnah. Let's say Mishnah Tzadik Amud Aleph. Kol midot sheba mikdos hayu nigdashos. So both say another very interesting halacha. All of the measures, we're speaking specifically now about dry measures. All of the dry measures inside of the Beis HaMikdash were nigdashos. Both say nigdashos means heaped. Heaped. Remember again, there are two ways that you could fill up a dry measure utensil. You could level it, right, or you could heap it. So the Mishnah over here says that all of the measures in the Beis HaMikdash were heaped. Now we'll discuss what that means. Chutz, mishal kohen gadol. Now we'll say, now understand what that means. What that means is that halacha l'maisa, if you say that something is heaped, so then what that means is that, remember, the amount of flour, right, for a regular karban mincha is how much? Is one isaron. So remember again, we already spoke about the idea that there was an isaron utensil. So what it means is as follows. If there was an isaron utensil, that means if you hold that they were heaped, that the utensil itself, meaning we'll call it in the walls of the utensil, did not contain an isaron. the way the utensil was designed is that the inside, what we call the chalal, the inside of the cavity of the utensil, right, held X, but in order to complete the Isaron measure, you had to pile, right? You had to heap ultimately the dry measure. That altogether created the Isaron measurement. Chutz Mishal Kohen Gadol, with the exception ultimately again of the Kohen Gadol, meaning of the Chavite Kohen Gadol, She'godsha L'socha. We'll say so Godsha L'socha means with the exception of the Kohen Gadol's utensil, which again we'll call the cavity of the utensil, contained the full measure of the Isaron. Rashi says Shayagodsha B'socha Shayagidola Kolkach Shekishahaisa Nimchakas Haya Ba'isaron. That it was so large that even once it was leveled out, it still contained an Isaron. So the Gemara goes weiter. Midas halach. We'll say, what about again the measurement for lach, for a liquid measurement? So midas halach berutzehen kodesh. Umidas is supposed to be actually another very interesting halacha. What about we spoke about this in passing the other day. What about spillage, right? What about spillage? What about if something goes over the sides of the utensil? What's the status? Is spillage the right word? Yes, spillage, right? Okay, good. Overflow, right? If overflow of the utensil, is that kadosh or not? So the Gemara says, so midas halach berutzehen kodesh. So we'll say when it comes to liquid measurements, ultimately again the overflow is kodesh as well. Umidas hayavesh berutzehen chol. We'll say interestingly enough, when it comes to the overflow of dry measure, so that ultimately again is going to be chol. So very interesting. So overflow of liquid measures will be kodesh. Overflow of solid measures are chol. Rabbi Akiva says, midas halach kodesh. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. He says that I shouldn't say. Rabbi Akiva says that ultimately overflow of liquid is kodesh. Lefichach berutzehen. I should say differently. Rabbi Akiva says midas halach kodesh, which means we'll say that. Just follow this for just a moment. Rabbi Akiva holds that the utensils used to measure liquids, those utensils themselves were consecrated. The measuring utensils themselves were consecrated. Therefore, because the measuring utensils are consecrated, the overflow is consecrated as well. Midas hayavesh chol, but the utensils used to measure dry measures were not consecrated. Therefore, lefichach berutzehen chol. Therefore, their overflow was chol as well. Rabbi Yossi Omer, so we'll say where Rabbi Akiva seems to be adding, we'll see what Rabbi Akiva is adding. Rabbi Yossi Omer, lo mishum zeh. Rabbi Yossi seems to disagree with Rabbi Akiva's logic, and he says, Elo shalach ne'ekar v'hayavesh eno ne'ekar. We'll say Rabbi Yossi, see here's what's interesting. Everyone seems to agree with the distinction between liquid and solid, right? That liquid measures, the overflow will be kodesh. Remember again, that everyone seems to be saying from the beginning. And the overflow, ultimately, again, from dry measures will not be kodesh. Rabbi Akiva understands that it's not a function of the identity of overflow, it's an identity of the function of the utensil. Liquid measures, the utensils themselves are kodesh, therefore the overflow is kodesh. Dry measures, the utensil itself is chol, therefore the overflow ultimately is also chol. Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's not that. Rabbi Yossi says it's something different. You could even say that both types of utensils are kodesh. So why difference between the overflow of liquid and solid? This is amazing. Also, Rabbi Yossi understands that the science of liquids is as follows. When you go ahead, see, we often understand that when you pour in, so I have a full cup, and I pour in more liquid. So what happens? So the liquid overflows. Which liquid overflows? So we'll say, so we often assume a LIFO, right? A LIFO method, right? Last in, first out, right? So whatever comes into the coffee cup last is what comes out first. Rabbi Yossi says not necessarily. It's also possible that with liquid, when you pour more liquid in, what does it do? It churns up the entire utensil of liquid, and it's possible that that which was already in the utensil comes out. We'll say, what's the chilik? See, if you tell me LIFO, last in, first out, then that means the liquid that was poured in last really was never in the kli. If it was never in the kli, it never became kodesh. Never became kodesh, it's not kodesh. If, on the other hand, you hold that the kli itself gets churned up, I don't know if churned up is the right word, but you understand, gets churned up, and therefore, again, it's possible that liquid that was already in the utensil comes out, then it's possible that ultimately, again, that would be kodesh as well. So, I'm sorry? Right, Yaakov and Esav. Oh, It's a LIFO versus FIFO machlokes in Rashi, right? By Yaakov and Esav. Last and first out, first and first out, yeah, or first and last out, which there's no, I don't think there's a philo, right? But okay, good. In any event, says the Gemara, money. So let's analyze this. Rabbi Meir. So listen to this. So whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect? See Rabbi Meir. So we'll say. So remember again, the Mishnah said that all of the measurements in the Beis Hamikdash were all mikdashos, were all heaped, with the exception ultimately again of the Kohen Gadol. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir, Chad Gadosh Avar. We'll say if it's Rabbi Meir ultimately held that there was one utensil for measuring out Menachos, and it was a heaped utensil. So that was one utensil for regular Korban Mincha and the Kohen Gadol's Korban Mincha. Rabbanan, and if you want to say it's the Rabbanan, Chada Umachu Kava. The Rabbanan hold also that there was one measuring utensil, but the Rabbanan hold that what? That ultimately it was a leveled utensil. So whose opinion does our Mishnah reflect? The Olam Rabbi Meir. Really it's Rabbi Meir. Umay komidos. What does Rabbi Meir says when he means komidos? Kol medidos. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the Gemara suggests it is the position of Rabbi Meir, and halacha lamaisa, kol midos doesn't have to be read as all measuring utensils, but rather again can be read as what? All measurements. All measurements that were taken every time something measured was taken in the Beis Hamikdash, hayu nikdashos. Ultimately, again, it was a heaped measure. Good. Midas halach berutzin kodesh. So we'll say. So remember again now. We have the machlokes in the Mishnah. So remember, we have on one hand the Tanakama telling me that ultimately, well, see, here's what's interesting. Everyone seems to agree that overflow liquid is kodesh, overflow dry measure is chol, right? So Rabbi Akiva gives his logic. Rabbi Akiva ascribes this halacha to the nature and identity ultimately of the utensils themselves, versus Rabbi Yossi, who understands that this is more about the movement of liquids versus solids. So it says the Gemara, Tana Savar, so Tanakama Savar, so we'll say Tanakama holds like this. This is actually a very interesting halacha. Tanakama Savar, Midas halach nimshecha bein mi bifnim, bein mi bachutz. Midas yavesh nimshecha mi bifnim, velo nimshecha mi bachutz. So we'll say this is really quite fascinating. So Tanakama holds that halacha lamaisa, the liquid measurement utensils are consecrated both on the inside and on the outside. Which means that what? If liquid hits the utensil, either on the inside of the utensil or on the outside of the utensil, halacha lamaisa, the liquid itself will be kodesh. Therefore, again, the overflow, which I will say again, never touches the inside of the utensil, but certainly what? Touches the outside of the utensil, will also be kadosh. On the other hand, yavesh nimshecha mi bifnim v'lo nimshecha mi b'chutz, dry measure utensils are halacha lamaisa considered to be, they are kodesh on the inside, but not kodesh on the outside. We'll say why the difference. This is just the way that the kedusha of the utensils in the Beis Hamikdash was set up, and therefore again, fine. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi in regular Rashi on top. Lo nimshechu b'chutz lefichach berutzein chol. So because the outside of the utensil was not anointed, was not consecrated, therefore again any kind of overflow remains unconsecrated. So we'll say that is the opinion of the Tanakama. I have Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva holds midas halach. So we'll say Rabbi Akiva so far agrees. He agrees that yes, the liquid utensil, measuring utensil, is kodesh on the inside and on the outside. Therefore, again, overflow will be kodesh as well. Midas yavesh lo nimshecha kol ikar. Rabbi say now what's fascinating about this is in Rabbi Akiva's model, Rabbi Akiva holds that halacha lemaisa, the utensil used for dry measures is not kodesh at all. It's not kodesh at all. Now, what does that mean? If it's not kodesh at all, well, then what Rabbi say? Then I have a bigger question than overflow. What's my question? The actual contents of the utensil itself. So again, look at Rashi. Top part of Rashi. Rabbi Kiva savar midas yavish lo nimshcha kol ikar v'cholhu. Rabbi Kiva holds the utensil itself is not a consecrated utensil. Lefichach mashe bifnim bikli kidushas pehu dimikadesh le. So we'll say the flour that is contained inside becomes kadosh. Why? Because I verbally designate it as being kadosh. Hilchach ma'deitztirich le mikadesh Berutzin de lo tzarech le lo mekadesh lefichach berutzeincho. Therefore, we'll say only that which I need do I verbally designate as kodesh, and therefore only that which is in the utensil ultimately is kodesh. But that which overflows is ultimately not going to be kodesh. So we'll say, so already you begin to see the machlokes. So you already see the first point of contention over here is the dry measure utensil. Tanakama telling me that what is the status of the dry measure utensil? Halacha l'maaseh again, it's kodesh on the inside, but not kodesh on the outside. Rabbi Akiva, the dry measure utensil is not kodesh at all. I say, how are the contents of the kli kodesh? I verbally designate them as being kodesh. But what am I verbally designating? Only that which is necessary ultimately again for the carbon itself. That which is not necessary, i.e. the overflow, is not kodesh. So it comes along. Rabbi Yossi says, Idi v'idi nimshcha mibifnim v'lo nimshcha mibchutz. So also Rabbi Yossi Shita, this is actually a really riveting machlokes. Rabbi Yossi Shita is that both the dry utensil and liquid utensil are both consecrated on the inside and not on the outside. So how do you account for the difference between overflow of liquid, which is considered to be kodesh, and overflow of solid, which is not? I'll tell you. V'hacha hainu taima dilach ne'ekar u'migavad demana ka'asi. And the reason the distinction of Osai is because we assume that when liquid is poured into a kli, it displaces. It displaces the liquid that was already inside of the kli, and therefore the liquid that comes out may be liquid that was already inside of the kli. Now, Rabbi say, if you hold that halacha l'maaseh, the liquid is coming from inside the kli, so remember again, Rabbi Yossi's model is that both liquid utensils and, or when I say liquid measure utensil and dry measure utensil are both kadosh mibifnim, not kadosh mibachutz. So if you hold that when liquid is poured in, it displaces liquid that was already inside the utensil, that liquid inside the utensil was already kodesh. Therefore, again, when it overflows the kli, it's possible that the overflow liquid, Rabbi say, was liquid that was already inside the kli, not just in liquid that was poured last. We don't say lifo, but rather, again, it's possible that it was liquid that was already inside the kli, that was already consecrated, and therefore, again, he will say that the overflow by liquid will be kodesh. On the other hand, v'hayavesh eno nekar. We'll say by solids, there's no such thing as displacement. In other words, we'll say, so a very simple idea. If you have a utensil that is filled with flour and you pour on a heaped measure to the point that the flour overflows the sides of the kli, there's no havamina that the flour that was at the bottom of that kli was the flour that overflowed, because that's just not the way properties of solids. Therefore, again, we assume that that which overflows the kli was never what? Was never inside the kli. Because it was never inside the kli, therefore what? It's not kodesh. As opposed to, like, so I'll say really quite a riveting machlokes that really, if you think about it, really is centered on the very identity of the measuring utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. Did they have sanctity or not? Tanakama telling me liquid measures inside and outside. Dry measures inside, yes. Outside, no. Rabbi Akiva, ultimately, again, liquid measure inside and outside. Dry measure, not at all. And Rabbi Yossi telling me that the truth is, it's really not a function of we could assume that the inside of the utensils ultimately, again, are kodesh, not the outsides. And this is really an issue of displacement. Liquid displaces liquid that was inside the utensil, therefore it's possible liquid inside the utensil is the one that poured out. Solids do not displace one another, and therefore, again, whatever pours over the side was stuff that was never inside the kli to begin with, and therefore is not kodesh. Incredible. So the Gemara says, V'chi ne'ekar ma'havi. But I will say, even if we say, v'hacha hainu taima delach, the ne'ekar migavad demana ka'asi, v'ayavesh no ne'ekar. V'chi ne'ekar ma'havi. But ultimately, again, even if we say that halacha l'maisa, that liquid displaces liquid that was already inside the kli, so that the overflow was liquid that was inside the kli, who cares? Gavra l'may ditzarech kamechavein. I will say, in general, there's an understanding that when it comes to measuring things out for carbonic purposes, there may be a bit of extra. And I will say, a person's kavana is that I only intend on what? On being makdish that which I need. I'm only going to be makdish the amount of flour that I need. I'm only going to be makdish the amount of wine that I need. And therefore, by definition, anything that is extra should be chulin. Anything that is extra should simply not be kadosh. Amrav din Rashishna Mishmei Dirav Zosa Meres Kli Sharis Mekadshin Shlomidas So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that a kli sharis, a service utensil, has the ability to sanctify an item even without the intention of the owner. So the fact that these items hit a kli sharis, by definition, sanctifies them, even though my das may be to the contrary. Ravina says no. The olam emelacha kli sharis in mekachin elamidas. Not necessarily. Ultimately, we could say that what? That a kli sharis is mekadesh only midas. I will say the only way a kli sharis is mekadesh is if you have intention for it to do so. So what's the issue over here? Ugzeira shemeyomru motziyeh mikli sharis lachol. And I will say the concern over here is that halacha lemaisa, people will think that you could take if we see that ultimately again that you're taking overflow and ultimately using it for unconsecrated purposes. People don't understand the halachos of overflow and spillage, but rather ultimately again what people see are items in a kli sharis. If you go ahead and you take items from a kli sharis and now you start to use them for chulin purposes, even though maybe you can, right? Halacha lamaisa, we're nervous about that. So apparently, when it comes ultimately again, when it comes ultimately to likta solids, so people understand that solid itself was never inside the utensil. When it comes to liquids, which much more concerned because people understand the halachas or the science of displacement. So because of that, once the liquid hits the kli sharis, even though again the overflow may have never been actually inside the kli, because it's possible that it was inside the kli, we're not going to let you use it for chulin purposes, because people will come to erroneously think that you could take something out of a kli sharis and use it for unconsecrated purposes. So most of Rabbi Zera is the kasha. Siddur es halech is actually a fascinating case. Siddur es halech v'esabazichon achar Shabbos. So listen to this. You made a mistake. The halach is lechem aponim is supposed to be placed on the mizbeach when? On Shabbos itself. And it's supposed to remain there for an entire week until the next Shabbos. Then you take it off, give it to the kohanim, put the new breads on. Listen to this case. In this situation over here, you forgot to put the bread on the shulchan on Shabbos. You put it there on Sunday. V'hikter sabazichin b'Shabbos. And also you go out and you offer up the bazichin, the spoons of frankincense on Shabbos. So also what's the halacha psula? The bread, it's a problem, right? It's possible. Why is it possible? Because the halacha is that the lechem has to be on the shulchan for 2 Shabbosos. The first Shabbos that it's placed on, and it has to be the second Shabbos ultimately when it's taken off. If it's only there Sunday, you have a problem. So what can you do? Ketzad yaseh, yanichenu l'Shabbos haba, leave the same lechem on the shulchan for one more Shabbos. Interesting halacha. Leave it on the shulchan for one more Shabbos. Shafilu hu ala shulchan yamim rabim in bekach klum. So we'll say, interestingly enough, apparently there is no issue with leaving the bread, the lechem, on a shulchan for a prolonged period of time. So fascinating. So the Gemara says, okay, you didn't have it there 2 Shabbosos, you put it there on Sunday instead of Shabbos, no problem. Leave it there one more week. So effectively, the same lechem will be on the shulchan for 2 weeks. So va'amai. But why is that? Hasam nami lema gezerah shemer yomru mafkidim b'kli sharis. So we'll say again, why aren't we concerned that people will come to erroneously think based on that what? That you can leave sacrificial or consecrated items in a kli sharis for a prolonged period of time. Now, normally the halacha is, if you leave something in a kli sharis for a prolonged period of time, what is that called? Lina. That's called lina. Right? That's called ultimately again leaving it for a prolonged period of time, which is a psul. So why? So we just said beforehand that we're nervous to allow you to use the spillage, right? Because of the overflow, because people will say you can take from a kli sharis and use it for chol. Why aren't we concerned to leave the lechem on the shulchan for 2 weeks? Why aren't we concerned that people will say, oh, you could just leave consecrated stuff in a kli sharis and it's no problem? To which the Gemara says, no. Pnim. So the Gemara says, pnim achutz karamis. Remember, the lechem hapanim is done inside the Beis HaMikdash. Who sees the inside of the Beis HaMikdash? Right? A couple of kohanim. Versus chutz, versus the measuring utensils, this was done in public view. Pnim, lav kuli alma yadi, chutz kuli alma yadi. Both say, what happens in the Beis HaMikdash stays in the Beis HaMikdash. So ultimately, again, people who sees what's happening inside the Beis HaMikdash. No one sees it. So because no one sees it, ultimately, again, people aren't going to come to make any kind of mistakes. Versus outside of the Beis HaMikdash, that's when people come to make mistakes. Tanan Hasam. So what we learn there? Most are nesachim the case of Mizbeach. So we'll see another interesting halacha. We'll get to the. I want to show you the halacha l'maisa on this also, but we'll get to the Mishnah first. Tanan Hasam, most are nesachim l'keitzam mizbeach. So we'll say the leftover of nesachim is given for what we call dessert for the mizbeach. What does that mean? My most are nesachim. What does it mean? The leftover of the nesachim. So you have machlokas. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef amar beirutze midos. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef means we'll say it means the additional measures, right? The overflow. Overflow ultimately again is dedicated to the what we call the Ketz HaMizbeach. So we spoke about Ketz HaMizbeach before. The idea is when it comes to the Mizbeach, we don't like the Mizbeach to remain dormant or idle. And therefore, again, halacha l'mais, in the event that no one was bringing karbanos, there was always like what we call a dessert fund. The dessert fund was there to ensure that the Mizbeach was never idle, and the Beis HaMikdash would bring karbanos if no one else was bringing karbanos. So therefore, again, any of the overflow from the Sachim was dedicated ultimately again for this particular purpose. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef Amar Beirutze Midos. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef says, no, it's not the overflow, but rather again it was the heaping of the measure. So also Rabbi Chia bar Yosef says that the measures were normally leveled off, and when you leveled it off, anything extra was set aside ultimately again for the Ketz HaMizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kosa Sheshaninu. So also Rabbi Yochanan holds as follows. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Hamekabel alav lesapek salasos me'arba." This is actually interesting halacha. Let's say a person takes upon himself to provide flour for the Beis Hamikdash. So he commits himself ultimately again to provide flour at 4 sitin per sela. That's the amount that he's committing to. 4 sitin, 4 sa'ah flour per sela. And what happens? Va'amdu b'shalosh. So we'll say then what happens? The price goes up. So now you can only get 3 sitin of flour for a sela, but yet he made the commitment to the Beis Hamikdash for 4 sin per sela. What's the halacha? Yaspik me'arba. Because you have to provide the Beis Hamikdash the flour at the price that you, essentially, when you give flour, when you pledge something to the Beis Hamikdash, you lock in the price at the time of the pledge. So even if the price goes up and they can only get 3 sin per sela, you still have to go ahead and give 4 sin per sela. On the other hand, Amad Beis, Mishalosh v'andu me'arba. Rabbi say, what happens if now halacha l'maisa, at the time you made your promise, you can go ahead and what? Only provide 3 sitin per sela, and then what happens? We'll say the price goes down. So now you could go ahead and provide 4 sitin per sela. What's the halacha? Misapik mi'arba. You have to give 4 sitin per sela, not 3 sitin per sela. Because what's the logic? Sheyad hekdesh al ha'elyona. Ultimately, again, we'll say yad hekdesh is al ha'elyona. In other words, the Beis Hamikdash always has the advantage. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, the Gemara says, so this would be an example, by the way, of Mosar Hanasachim. So we'll say, so over here, what do you see? So let's say in this particular case, where you pledged 3, but it turns out that what? That you're giving 4 because the price went down. So we'll say, what do we do with that extra sa'ah? So we set that aside for Ketz HaMizbeach. We put that in the what we'll call additional carbon fund, that in the event that ultimately the carbon of the Mizbeach is ever dormant, the Beis Hamikdash has funds to be able to use to purchase additional carbonos. Tanya Kavase Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. We'll say a brayso that supports Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Tanya Kavase Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya Kavase Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Beirutze midos halalu mahu. When we say ultimately again, let me say that differently. Beirutze midos halalu mahu aya osaba. And when you have these additional measurements, Rabbi say, remember when you leveled off the flour, and you have that additional flour. So what do you do with it? Im yesh zevach achar yakrivu imo. If there's another carbon being offered that requires this extra measure, offer it up with this other carbon. Ve'im lanu, and if they sit overnight, yifsilu belina, then ultimately again they become possible with lina. Ve'im lav, and Rabbi say if they have not yet become possible with lina, what you can do is makitzin b'hanes hamizbeach. You can go ahead and use it for dessert of the Mizbeach. The Ketz ze mahu, and ultimately again, what would they offer up for Ketz Mizbeach? Olos. They would offer up olos. Habasa l'shem olos. Habasa l'shem. The meat would go as a carbon for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Va'oros l'kahanim, and ultimately again, the hides would be used for the kohanim. Tanya Kavase Rabbi Yochanan. So we have brayso that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Hamekabel alav l'sapik salasos me'arba. If a person took upon himself to provide flour for the Beis Hamikdash at a rate of what we call 4 sitin per sela, va'amdu mishalosh, but then the price goes up, you can only provide 3 sitin per sela, so mesapek me'arba. The halach is you have to still provide the 4 that you promised. On the flip side, mishalosh va'amdu me'arba. But I will say ultimately again, if you promise 3, but then the price went down, you could do 4 sitin per sela. Masapik me'arba, you give 4. Why? Shiyat hekdish al ha'alyona. Ultimately, again, the Beis Hamikdash always has the upper hand. V'zeu sheshaninu. Most certain in the case of Mezech. And I will say this would be the example of when we say that the extra measurements ultimately again go to the dessert fund of the Mizbech. So I will say, what does it mean extra measurements? So this would be an example of it. I pledged to give 3 sitin per sela, which was the going marketplace at the time I made my commitment. Price then goes down. I now could get 4 sitin per sela. I have an obligation to give 4 sitin per sela now, but I only pledged 3. So what happens with the extra 1? It goes to the Beis Hamikdash, but the Beis Hamikdash sets it aside and uses it for what we call this Kates fund. That in the event that the Mizbeach is dormant for some reason, halacha l'maisa, this fund we go ahead and we use to bring additional karbanos. Good. So we'll say, so now we go back. So first of all, so that ends this sugya. But again, we want to just close out. What's the story with the utensils? Because remember, again, going back to our 3 machlokes, Tanakama, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi, what's the halachic status of the liquid utensils, the dry measure utensils? So the Rambam says like this: Kol hamidos, this is in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, Parak Aleph Halacha Yutes. Kol hamidos ha'elu kodesh umikli sharis. Elo shemidos halach nimshichu mibifnim mibachutz uklei hayavesh lo nimshichu ela bifnim. So we'll say, so the halacha is that ultimately, again, liquid measure utensils are kadosh on the inside and on the outside, versus dry measure utensils, which are only kodesh on the inside, not on the outside. Lefichach beirutze midos halach kodesh. Therefore, again, I'll say halacha l'maisa, overflow from a liquid utensil is kodesh, because the overflow, whether it's coming from the inside or hits the outside, will be kodesh. And ultimately, again, the overflow from dry measure utensils will be chol. And I will say now it all comes together. And what do you do with the additional amounts of the overflow from the yavesh? They would, even though it's chol, they would still use it for the Beis Hamikdash. For what? For what? For the Ketz HaMizbeach, for the dessert fund. Why not just let it go out to chol? Because that's what we saw before. Gzera, we're concerned that people will come to think that you could take something from a klisharis and just suddenly use it for mundane purposes. So ultimately, again, the Rambam Paskins like the position of the Tanakama. Incredible. Says the Mishnah. Really, really interesting. Says the Mishnah. Kol karbanos atzivur. So also here we go. Let's go back there. So all communal offerings, va'yachid, and individual offerings, tu'un nisachim. So we'll say in general, all karbanos come with nisachim. Okay, now we're going to see all karbanos. The rule is going to be all karbanos come with nisachim except what? Except the ones that don't, right? Except the ones that don't. So watch this. So kol karbanos atzivur va'yachid tu'un nisachim. So we'll say all general communal offerings, individual offerings require nisachim. Chutz min habachar v'hamaiser v'hapesach. With the exception, ultimately, again, of the bechar offering, of the maiser offering, the Pesach offering, chatos and asham. That's all, right? Those are all the exceptions. Ella shechatos shamatzor v'asham tu nisachim. And bro said, however, there is in the, even though we just said a chatos and an asham normally doesn't get in nisachim, there is a chatos and an asham which does get in nisachim. The chatos of mitzora and the asham ultimately again require nisachim, require libations. Good. Says the Gemara. Here we go. Turn Rabbanon. Say now we're going to go through and try to understand how we know which karbanos require nesachim, which karbanos don't require nesachim. So Tan Rabbanon, va'asisem isha laHashem. So the pasuk says, you shall go ahead and make for them a fire offering to Hashem. So Yachol kala ola liishim yehi ta'un nesachim. So we'll say, I might have thought that anything that is placed on the fire ultimately again requires nisachim, which Rabbi say would include every single carbon. Afilu mincha, maybe even a mincha ultimately requires nisachim. Talmud lomar ola. Therefore, Rabbi say the pasuk says ola. There is dafkan ola which requires nisachim. I shlomim minayin. So okay, so now I know that ola requires nisachim. How do I know that shlamim requires nisachim as well? Talmud lomar zevach. Therefore, we'll say the pasuk uses a more generic term ultimately of what? Of zevach. Zevach just means a carbon. Told to me now, how do I know that I told it requires nisachim? Talmud lomar o zevach. So we'll say the o comes to include something additional. Yachol shanimar be'af bechar u'maiser u'pasach v'chatas v'asham. So at that point, if you're going to say o zevach, maybe o zevach comes to include what? All karbanos. So maybe I should include bechar, maiser, pesach, chatas, and asham. Talmud lomar lefalei neder o b'nedava. Therefore, we'll say the pasuk says to fulfill a neder. or a nedava. Ba beneder unedava ta'un nesachim. But we'll say only the type of carbon which technically can be brought as a neder or as a nedava ultimately requires nesachim. She'eno ba beneder unedava. We'll say carbon which cannot come as a neder or as a nedava ein ta'un nesachim. So we'll say here the Gemara is for the first time espousing a rule. The rule is a carbon which could potentially come as a neder or a nedava requires nesachim. A carbon which can never come as a neder or a nedava does not require nesachim. So we'll say now it all begins to come together. Now we begin to understand the exclusions. You cannot bring a neder chatos. You can't say, you know what? I feel like I just want to bring a chatos, right? I didn't do anything wrong, Baruch Hashem, but I'm kind of like a team player. Someone did something wrong, so I'm going to go ahead and bring a chatos. It doesn't work. You can't bring a chatos like that. You can't bring a pesach like that. So we'll say, so if it can't be brought to neder or nedava, then halacha lemaisa, it doesn't get nesachim. So mashma lohotzies elu. So we'll say, so now we're going to say this pasuk comes to exclude the list we said above. Otzies chovos habos machmas haregel. So beregel. So we'll say ultimately again, maybe I should also exclude obligatory offerings which come on the Yom Tiv because of Yom Tiv. Umaynihu. So we'll say ultimately again, what's the example of this? Olos ri'iyah v'shalmi chagiga. We'll say maybe ultimately again, olos ri'iyah, shalmi chagiga, which are the different karbanos ultimately of Yom Tiv, shouldn't go ahead and get nesachim either. Talmud lomar o b'moadechem. Therefore, we'll say the pasuk says, or the karbanos which are brought on your Yomim Tovim. Kol haba b'moadechem ta'u nesachim. Ultimately, again, anything that is brought on your Yom Tiv, i.e. Shami Chagiga, Olos Ri'iyah, requiring nesachim. Mashma lahavias elu. So we'll say, okay, so now you're telling me it comes to include these other karbanos. Avi si'irei chatos. So maybe I'll go ahead and include the case of a si'ir v'chatos as well. Hoyel u'ba'in chova b'regel. Ultimately, again, because this could be brought as an obligatory offering on the regel as well. Now, we'll say, if you look at Rashi says over here, Avi siri chatos, the hoil u'ba'in b'moed, you tu'uni nisachim. Since the siri chatos ultimately, again, is brought on the moed, therefore, halacha l'maisa, it should require nesachim as well. Now, if you look at Rashi in Kisvei Yad, Rashi says, siri chatos, shal musay regalim, debekulhu ksiv u'si'ir chatos echad. We'll say it's amazing, no? This is amazing. There's a sir chatas brought in every Yom Tov, including when? Including on Rosh Chodesh. Look at that, the Rosh Chodesh tie-in. So I say, I'm going to thought, therefore, again, you just told me before that any carbon that is brought on a Yom Tov requires nesachim. Well, Yomim Tovim also have a chatas offering. So if that's the case, I should bring nesachim I should bring nesachim for the chatas as well. To which the Talmud says, Talmud Lomar, V'chin sa'aseh ben bakar. So we'll say, so therefore the pasuk says, so shall you do for the ben bakar. Now what does this mean? Ben bakar bichlal haya. So we'll say the ben bakar was in the general principle of all karbanos. For the amayatza, why is the Torah single it out? Lahakish love, to make a hekish to it. Ma ben bakar miyuchad ba beneder unedava. We'll say just like the carbon, the ben bakar could be brought as a neder or nedava. Afkol ba beneder unedava. Ultimately, again, so too we'll say which type of carbon requires in the sachim. Only karbonos which can be brought as a neder and nedava. So we'll say we begin to see over and over and over. This is the guiding light principle. If the carbon could be brought as a neder or a nedava, then what? Then halacha l'maisa, it comes with nesachim. If it cannot be brought as a neder or nedava, it does not get nesachim. So the Gemara says, so why does the pasuk come along and say to create a pleasing aroma for HaKadosh Baruch Hu min habakar min hatzon? The fish amar ola, because when the pasuk said before ola, shomea ani afilu olas ha'of b'mashma. I'm an authority say. So now we established before that an ola gets nesachim. I would have thought that applies to even what? Olas ha'of, even a bird ola. So the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar, min habakar u min hatzon div Rabbi Yoshia. So Rabbi Yoshia says, no, it's dafka min habakar min hatzon. Only if it's min habakar min hatzon does it get nesachim. But ultimately, again, if it's an oaf, it does not get nesachim. Rabbi Yonasan Omer enot tzarich. Rabbi Yonasan says, you don't need this drasha. Hareyu Omer zevach va'of. Hareyu Omer zevach. I'm sorry. The pasuk says, well, say zevach. And what? Va'of enot zevach. Oaf is not a zevach. Rabbi says zevach always refers to an animal offering, and oaf is not a zevach. If that's the case, then why does the pasuk have to say min habakar min hatzon? Fi shene emar adam ki yakriv mikem karban Hashem min habehema u min habakar min hatzon. Because Rabbi says, since the pasuk is a person from among you will offer up a carbon to Hashem from a behema min habakar min hatzon yochol haomer hari alai olah yavi mishnehem. So we'll say, I'm going to thought that if a person says, so Harei alai ola, I hereby take upon myself an ola, then maybe I have to bring both a bakar and son. Talmud lomar min ha-bakar o min ha-son. Therefore, I will say the pasuk says from bakar or from son, ratza echad maybe, ratza shnayim maybe. Ultimately, again, if you want to bring one, you could bring one. If you want to bring two, you could bring two. All right, so we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up, still in the middle of the drasha, we'll pick up with Rabbi Yonasan and Meretz Hashem tomorrow.